So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. This is our RIR panel for NANOG 81 Virtual, a panel that we probably might not have been easily been able to do any other way. We have people literally from all over the world at all different times of day or night or morning to talk about IRR tech. And we have all of the IRRs represented. Here is a list of those folks at the top, in alphabetical order by RR. I'm going to let them each do their own brief introduction. This is their contact information, which I'm sure they'll welcome a email if you'd like to have a quick follow-up with them, but they may point you to a more general alias if it's more IRR operational related. If you do contact them, I hope you'll at least offer them some kudos for doing this. Very generous of their time to do so. My name is John Christoph. There's my contact information down below if you need to reach out to me. I work at DePaul University. I also am a PhD candidate student at the University of Illinois, Chicago. I run a project called dataplan.org and some other stuff. And that's all I'm really going to say about me, because it's not about me, it's about the IRRs. So let's talk to our friends at the IRRs. So let me go, I'm going to just kind of go in the order that my windows are displaying each one of you. And I'll just ask each of you to just briefly do your own little introduction, say your name, say which IRR you represent. And then if you would possibly maybe tell us one thing unique about the IRR that you represent, maybe something that is distinct, maybe something interesting, maybe something good, maybe something bad, maybe something new. Whatever you can think of off the top of your head, we'd be happy to hear it. So I'll start with you, Carlos. You're first in my window.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity of doing this panel. And thank you for being a part of NANOG, which is a conference, an event, and community I've looked up to for many years, actually. My name is Carlos Martinez. I'm based in Montevideo, Uruguay. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for LACNIC. LACNIC is the RIR responsible for Latin America and parts of the Caribbean. We share the Caribbean in a strange way, to say something, with my friends from AREN. Something unique about LACNIC. Well, I think there are a couple of things that I think make LACNIC a bit different. LACNIC is one of the younger RIRs. LACNIC began operations in 2002. It was actually incorporated as an organization in 2002. So it's rather young. And the other thing that I think makes us a bit different is that we conduct business in 3 different languages, which always presents interesting sets of challenges when trying to reach parts of our community. We have a significant part of our community which speaks Portuguese. We're Brazilian membership. We have obviously Spanish community, and we also have some English-speaking countries in our region, like Belize and Trinidad and Tobago, for example. So I think that makes different in a way, interesting, because I actually have had the opportunity of visiting places and meeting folk that otherwise I would never probably been there, like for example, the Netherlands islands in the Caribbean, which is quite interesting.
That's very good. Next in my window, George, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm George Michelson. I'm the product manager at APNIC for registry, and that covers off on core registry product, maintenance of the record keeping, but also services like WHOIS, the Internet Routing Registry, RPKI, RDAP. We have quite an interesting structure here in APNIC. We're a federal structure with national registries, and so I'm in charge of the technical liaison function for those guys as well. And we also do back-end tier 2 support for the frontline service delivery. As you can tell, I'm a British Australian, been here about 34 years, and 20 of them I spent working in the RIR system. So APNIC, we were the second regional internet registry to come into existence after the RIPE NCC. We've got about 56 economies in our membership. We have this more complex structure than a lot of NANOG members might be used to with ARIN and RIPE and AFRINIC, because we have that pre-existing national structure. 4 of them, in fact, were founders of APNIC. That's JPNIC, KRNIC, TWNIC, and CNNIC, and 3 have formed since APNIC came into being. That's VNNIC, IDNIC in Indonesia, and IRIN in India. We've got about somewhere around 20,000 participating asset holders, internet number resource holders in our region, and it's pretty much 50-50 between direct membership and the members of the National Internet Registry. Something that people might not realize about the Asian footprint is that we have a much more complex structure now. We've been checking industry subtypes, and classic ISP, telco, mobile, it's actually only about 35% of our overall membership. A lot more direct ownership of addresses is now in fintech or in the data center. That's probably Amazon, the content holders, those guys, government related service, people who have no core routing knowledge, maybe holding asset and relying on other people to do the routing for them. And that's made for a bit of a change in how we think about service delivery, because we're not dealing with people all the time who are in the classic NOG community. We're dealing with people who have to have one of these weirdo internet numbery things, but they don't actually know what to do with it. And it means we've kind of shifted some of our service focus a bit. Anyway, that's enough about me.
That's fascinating. Thank you very much. Next in my window going clockwise for me would be you, Felipe.
So my name is Felipe. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at the RIPE NCC. I'm responsible for registry operations, which includes all the management of internet number resources, and also software development activities, which include things like RPKI, who is routing registry, and all the internal software as well, like the LAR portal, registry software, and so on. The RIPE NCC is the regional internet registry for Europe, Middle East, parts of Central Asia, and Russia, which makes us quite a diverse RIR with many different cultures participating, which brings its own challenges from the point of view of geopolitical challenges and so on. We are the oldest RIR. I think we're founded in 1992. And we have at around 20,000 members and a little bit more than 23,000 LAR accounts. I think that's it from me.
Thank you, Felipe. Mark, if you would.
Sure. So I'm Mark Costers. I'm the CTO of ARIN. And basically I'm responsible for all of engineering operations within ARIN. So whether it's development or operations or even IT support within our organization, that's under my umbrella. So sort of a little bit of stuff about me is in 1991, I worked for this place called the DoDNIC. And in 1992, I remember this guy named Daniel Karenberg from this organization named RIPE come over and say, hey, I want to start actually pulling data from you guys because I want to run a registry in dealing with Europe. And I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. Okay, let's see what we could do. And a little bit later, there's this guy named David Conrad who did the same thing for APNIC. So it was basically, I've been on the ground floor of this since 1991. I helped put ARIN together in my spare time. After hours, while I was working for VeriSign, I would come over and help set up ARIN. And now here I find myself actually working for ARIN. So it's a great place to be. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And last but not least, hello, Emrich.
Thank you, John. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity giving to AFRINIC today. Actually, it's my first time participating to NANOG, and I've always been on the on the mailing list, but now it's good to be live, basically. So Afrinic, as you know, is the youngest RIR. We established business, I think, in 2005. And obviously we got help from our friends, all other RIRs to set up our operations, and we are quite thankful for that as well. What else from Afrinic? Yes, we might be one of the last RIRs to still have IPv4. I think just over 2 million addresses remaining, which we think will be depleted soon. Right now, we are in a phase called soft landing phase 2, actually, of the soft landing phase, where we are only allocating very small pieces of IPv4. I myself work in the research department, so I'm leading data analytics projects and also doing research on many different aspects of the internet, from RPKI to performance to security. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you, Amish. I wonder if by mentioning you have IPv4, you'll see an influx of some new potential members and customers coming towards you. We'll see. But I want to remind you in the audience here that what I think we'll find too as we broadcast this, those who are watching this know that this isn't live, that there'll be people from not only the North America region, the typical NANOG attendee, but we've seen an additional influx of people from all over the world. So it'll be good for them to not only see their own RIRs represented, but those who they want to interact with as well. Okay, so I'm going to start firing off a few questions. I'll try to get in a few. I'll try to make it equitable to get around to everybody. You feel to interrupt or bring something up if you want to add something. Of course, I'll target one person in particular, but we'll try to go round robin more or less in some orderly fashion. We probably have about maybe 20 or so minutes. I don't want to monopolize the time and trespass on the time. What I hope will be some good follow-up questions by the live Q&A when this does get broadcast on the day of the conference. So let me start with you, George. You'll be the lucky contestant number one. One of the things that people maybe know a little bit less about is how all of you, I assume you all know each other reasonably well, or colleagues of each other reasonably well. And you have ways, I assume, of working together and cooperating. And one of those ways, I think, is through the NRO. What is the NRO?
So the NRO is the collective entity that was formed by the individual RIRs to give some coherence and cohesion to provision of service and application of policy under a regional structure. We are all independent bodies. All the RIRs are independent, and we're really quite fiercely independent. We respect our local members' priorities and preferences. I've had the luxury of going to other RIR meetings, and boy, they are feisty in ways you wouldn't expect. There's kind of local issues, but there is, of course, that global address policy context, and there's global alignment issues facing things like the ISTAR, IETF, ICANN, you know, interactions across that space. It's useful to have a converged body. And we did a lightweight construction here. Rather than making a heavyweight body that sat on top of us and had its own infrastructure and had its own costs, it's a really small secretariat function. It's pretty much one or two people, a general manager, Herman, who operates from APNIC's territory. He actually worked in LACNIC for years and years. He's been involved in more than one region. And we have a communications specialist who works in us. I think from memory, that also may now come from the LAC region, but it has been someone from the RIPE region. And we kind of carve up delivery of functions between us. So for a while, a converged statistics and delegation report was being made in APNIC. There were some issues in the software control process and reflections of how that worked for different registries. That job moved to the RIPE region, and they've done a huge reinvestment implementing the design and the delivery of a converged statistics report for the NRO. So things like that happen, and we operate working groups by function. We have an engineering coordination group. It's the one we all talk in. We meet at IETF meetings typically, and we have an annual offsite where we coordinate a worksheet. And that's helped us deliver things like RDAP, the new JSON format for the same data in WHOIS, and to deliver convergence in our services across things like RPKI, and also to converge the delivery of how we communicate key messages in address management out to the wider community. But we have a communications working group and a registry services working group. They've been looking at a thing called ITHI, which is Internet Health Measurements, an initiative that ICANN started, and we've taken that on board and are now looking into our data services to reflect the same kind of thing. So it's a lightweight, small, coordinating body, and we just seem to make it work. It's really pretty effective.
Yeah, that seemed like a pretty complete answer, but if anyone else has anything to add, feel free to chime in. Amrish, let me ask you a question. There was an interesting report that came out of your IRR recently, this WHOIS audit. What was this all about? What can you tell us about that? Why was it interesting and noteworthy?
Yeah, indeed. Recently, Afrinic published a report called the WHOIS Accuracy Report. It's basically an audit that Afrinic carried out. So the audit started a couple of months ago when there was some alleged fraud of IPv4. So IPv4 were misappropriated. And basically, somewhere in 2019, basically the FBI contacted the Supreme Court of Mauritius, where Afrinic is based, to start an investigation based on some complaints that they received from researchers in the US. So this is where Afrinic started a full-on audit and actually discovered that there was indeed misappropriation of IPv4 address space, and unfortunately this was done by a former Afrinic employee who actually had hostmaster rights. So that person was able to access the database in an unauthorized fashion, unfortunately. Yes, so this IP audit enabled us to understand which IP address space were allocated to organizations without having a proper, we call it a registration service agreement with Afrinic, and without having any trail of tickets being open, so on and so forth. And we have also seen that a lot of the space that were misappropriated were actually dormant space, so they were not even appearing on the routing table. So they were either in the Afrinic pool, in the available Afrinic pool, or they were legacy space. So legacy space, as you know, is space that have been allocated to organizations prior to the establishment of the RIR system. And some of them are used, some of them are not used. They were part of the space that were actually misused. So the report is to create some transparency around the events, what happened, and what are the next steps in terms of strengthening access to the database and improving the process so that such things do not happen again. Yeah.
I hope people who haven't checked it out, check it out. I think it was something very valuable, and I think the community owes you a bit of gratitude for producing that. I think it was very interesting. Carlos, except for Amrish, I suppose, who still has some IPv4 addresses. I think there was a time years ago when that runout was imminent for most of us, that some people questioned, well, what are the IRRs going to do? They're not going to have any more addresses to deal out there. What's their job going to be? So now that the V4 exhaustion is pretty much complete, has your work changed? Are you doing less? Can you just sit back and relax now? What's happening? What's changed about the role now that you don't have V4 addresses?
That's a very interesting question. Right now, I would say I cannot say that our work has changed or actually gone down in any way. I think we are working more than ever. Although it's true that it's too early in the, I would say, run out process to actually tell, because we are still seeing some allocations. We have this waiting list. We are still doing some IPv4 allocations out of recovered space, revoked space, and some allocations that were being analyzed before the actual run out. People are requesting more IPv6, which is interesting. I was reading earlier today. I was reading a report by Jeff Houston from IPNIC, which details the registry operations for all the RIRs in 2020. And actually, I was very surprised to see that LACNIC was the RIR that had the most registry allocations performed on IPv6. Not necessarily the biggest space, but the individual registry operations. LACNIC was the RIR that made the most allocations of IPv6 in 2020, which was rather, surprising in an interesting way. We are seeing a lot of demand for our other type of services. For example, RPKI. RPKI usage has been growing a lot during the past 2 years, and is right now this actually demanding a lot of engineering effort from my team. We have an interesting historical anomaly in LACNIC. We didn't operate routing registry for historical reasons. I'm not exactly sure. I tried to research why it was that way, but LACNIC was the only RIR that didn't operate the routing registry. And a couple of years ago, we decided to do something about that. And we are now operating a simplified, I would say, routing registry that basically feeds or creates or synthesizes RPSL objects out of RPKI information, and that has seen a lot of uptake in usage. And again, we are facing another challenge which is providing these services across the region, because we also have some NIRs, and we have the challenge of integrating these services across not only our own membership, but the membership of the NIRs, which presents its own set of challenges. We recently, for example, a year and a few months ago, we started providing, in coordination with NIC Brazil, RPKI services for the membership in Brazil. And we've been working with our friends in NIC Mexico for providing RPKI in Mexico as well. And right now, for the last year and a half, I would say, we've been finally able to provide RPKI service throughout the region. And yeah, I have the feeling that we are working more than ever. Eventually, I believe things will probably settle down at some point, but probably not in the next few years.
I'm not so sure that's true, but I'm glad you're busier than
Can
ever.
I come in there, John?
Of course.
Yeah.
So I think Carlos is hiding his light under the bushel, because he's actually been doing a huge amount of work doing development work as well. He's got an activity that's about network security that LACNIC does, building capacity inside his community to have better resilience against the attacks. They're doing amazing work there. He's been funding development of code in RPKI that's become really significant in our footprint. And there's it's not a competition, but it kind of is a competition between us. For instance, Aaron did heaps and heaps of work specifying API bindings for service delivery for members using REST and JSON. We've been looking at that and we're thinking, wow, how can we leverage things from that? RIPE NCC, they did all the groundwork developing RPSL-based systems, and their engine of running that WHOIS service and routing registry, we got hold of that and operate a fork of that code. I think Afrinic are using parts of that code as well. So we all kind of leverage tech off each other. Like Carlos, our actual transactional work with holders of addresses just hasn't gone away. And it's kind of two-faced. There's the part which is we have a huge legacy of holders that have basically not kept data up to date. It might not be entirely the same in ARIN, but they have the LRSA and they have all of that pre-ARIN registry state. We've got a similar story. In fact, ARIN did an amazing job of helping all of us, the second comers, get that data and incorporate it. A lot of that data is very old. And so there's a kind of job there keeping those records up to date. The other thing is, no ISP wants to terminate the abuse phone calls when someone says, what is that IP doing on my house? And they're all building customer more specific records about who's really using the information. We don't have a mechanism like SWIP or AHU is, so there's a whole bunch of transactional work in APNIC keeping on top of how do I document the real users of the resource who are live in the network. It's more than just BGP. And that's a lot of help desk work and a lot of human interaction work. So yeah, we still all have jobs.
Well, I'm glad you said that. And I was a leading question. I know that you guys are more than busy. This is an opportunity for you to tell everyone else how much actual work you're doing. I knew RPKI was one of those things, and I'm glad you brought that up. That was actually maybe one of my questions I'll ask you, Felipe, is one of the things that's come up from time to time, I think in a few of the different regions, and there's a couple on a few of the different mailing lists, is because each IRR is a trust anchor, and you know, act independently as a trust anchor, and the processes behind how you run IPCare, I think people are still trying to better understand. Maybe you're trying to also better implement. So tell us a little bit about maybe the process of how you may do testing, verification, and maybe something about how ROAs get pushed out. What do those processes look like? Maybe from going back a little ways, and where are we headed? How are the IRRs moving in that direction to really improve the RPKI?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And taking a hook from what Carlos said before, since a couple of years ago, we have been experiencing very huge growth in RPKI usage within our region. So I did some homework for this session, so I got some numbers. So just to get some ideas, it took us 8 years to go from 0 to 10,000 ROAs. So from 2011 until June 2019, and then took 1.5 years to double that amount. And you can see that over the last 2 years that you can see this huge exponential growth. And because of that, it experienced more pressure to operate Trust Anchor, not only in terms of availability and resiliency and so on, but also in terms of integrity, like the integrity of the Trust Anchor and the integrity of our processes. So since mostly beginning of last year, when we got some funding secured from our board, we have been working harder in terms of increasing the resiliency and the security of our Trust Anchor. So we're running a project that we're calling RPKI Resiliency. And one of the things that we're doing is defining an audit framework for RPKI. We're partnering with a third party, which is called British Standards Institution. And together with them, we're defining a SOC 2 Type 2 audit report. And the idea with that is that we can have relevant controls for how to audit our internal processes. So in the middle of this process today, like tailoring made this kind of report. And then later this year, we're going to hire another company that is going to actually audit us. That's one of the initiatives that we had last year. We have many others in place. Another challenge that we have in terms more of infrastructure. We run most of our infrastructure in our data centers in Amsterdam. But if you really want to be highly available, we want to leverage data centers all across the world. So we're looking into deploying our infrastructure to the cloud. So looking mostly into AWS and how we can leverage on their multi-region infrastructure. So in case of one of the regions is unavailable, we can fail over to a different region. But you also don't want to be fully dependent on a single cloud provider. So we also want to be able to keep running the infrastructure in our own data centers. So in case there is an unavailability from the cloud provider, we can also fail over to our own infrastructure and keep running from there.
Is it just maybe a question for all of you, perhaps, but Felipe, maybe I'll direct it to you since you just answered. Do we foresee the trust anchors in particular getting to a point where the root system for the DNS is massively scaled through things like Anycast? Do we anticipate something like that for trust anchors one day, perhaps? Not so much for load, but maybe even for resiliency from security threats, like a denial of service attack. Is that where we're headed, you think?
I'll sort of chime in here. And yeah, yes, our repositories are things that need to be highly scaled up as we grow. And we're seeing growth. All of us are seeing growth on the number of fetches that are going across our infrastructures and making sure that we're ahead of the curve. And someday we will be as massively scalable, maybe not to the extent that the root servers are quite, but it'd be in a different way. But it's something that we are looking to do and are in the process of doing, actually. So Felipe has actually been working on stuff, growing things through AWS. We've been working through Google. So it just gives you sort of an idea of the big differences that we have, but yet we're all working on similar sort of ideas and concepts.
Very good. Nick, let's continue with you, Mark. You had been brought up in the context of RDAP. What's the state of who is an RDAP?
Who is when you look at directory services in general, there's been lots of forays in this space. So who is has been a protocol that's been around for forever. And basically you ask a query and you get back a response, a very simple protocol. And so people have been using this for years. And one of the things that you don't get out of it is like, hey, where's this IP address 193 something or other? Where's that coming from? And it's like, oh yeah, that's in the ripe region. How do you know that? And so one of the things that was very early in the process was this thing called a referral who is, saying, well, we might not have the data, but kind of like similar mirroring DNS, let's go ahead and show you where a better place to go to get that information. That didn't quite work out as well as it did. But the latest foray, and this is actually using basically a web version of that sort of similar framework, using JSON, actually saying, hey, if I have the data, I'll give it to you. If I don't have the data, I'll send a redirect so you can get to the data from a closer place. So that is work that's been underway in IETF. It's actually going through the standards process now. So there's lots of good forward progress on that front, not only from the registries, but also the domain registries. So they're also very much involved in this. So it brings on lots of new things that actually people can sort of leverage. Internationalization being one. Another one being dealing with better ideas of privacy. Because right now, anyone can see the data and who is, and there's no sort of security access associated with it. With RDAP, you can actually create those sort of access controls if you wish. So there's a lot more potential there than we have with our traditional WHOIS service.
Okay.
Again,
there's probably a couple follow-up questions to this. Go ahead, George.
Mark is kind of hiding his light under the bushel because a lot of the heavy lifting in that standards work got done by Aaron Tech staffers. They've taken a strong lead in doing that core protocol development work. I think it was a massive benefit to the wider community. And we've all taken on board this idea of converging how we do things for various reasons. Who is kind of fractured a bit, and these structural elements of how we returned answers in WHOIS, they just didn't really quite line up. We had different language in our region to talk about things. So if you're on the consumer side trying to read and parse WHOIS, you're facing that barrier. They do it a bit different in LACNIC. ARIN is not exactly like, right, come into RDAP, we've got this golden opportunity to come to some agreement. How do we tell you this is the asset holder of the internet address? What's the structural element here in JSON? Machine parsable. It's really a golden moment for improving that kind of service delivery. And those guys, they did a lot of work to get this right. So the other thing is, for reasons that I still don't understand, ARIN, they terminate like 50 or 60% of all the queries in RDAP. And then they have to say, oh, no, that's not with us. You've got to go over here. So even though there's a global steerage file right up in the top, ARIN is still having to do a lot of the traffic management to get the queries to us. It's just weird.
Yeah. Yeah. So we share numbers from time to time. And what George is saying, the numbers that we see are quite high. So we see 1,800 queries per second across our directory services constellation. Just gives you an idea of the scale that we're dealing with. And it's more than just one site. We have 3 sites right now. And in each site,
and those aren't UDP queries, DNS queries. Those are
those are TCP queries, and actually the queries themselves are quite complicated. It's not a hash sort of response that can go back off of a query. It's really,
it's of course HTTPS. It's encrypted HTTP complex JSON. It's rather heavy. It's not a simple UDP packet.
So it looks easy from the user side, and we're all going to be very grateful from a tool building perspective. You'd mentioned, or someone had mentioned, this idea of privacy. Is there a risk that goes too far? There's a lot of complaints about who is privacy because of GDPR. Are we going to end up in the same position with address and ASN directory information where it's redacted for reasons that are unhelpful for various kinds of analysis investigation? Is that a real risk that we
There's potential for that to be a risk? I think we'd be wrong to say, oh, no, that couldn't happen, because we face legal pressures. I mean, RIPE in particular with GDPR, but also ARIN, they've got CCPA, the Californian obligations. We can be told in the regime, the political, economic environment we work in by an authority, you have to change. So there is the risk. But the thing is, one of the standards in RDAP is the idea of using federated authentication, OAuth. And if we go with that model and adopt that framework, people who need to know, law enforcement, legal, track and trace, ISPs who need to do technical contact, they can identify, and it could be they identify in ARIN and their token is usable inside AFRINIC or in RIPE or in APNIC or LACNIC. We can do that kind of federated authentication model and uncover the data that if you're just a casual user, we kind of have obligations to hide. So we know there's the potential for a loss of public view of this data, but we're thinking ahead about ways we could maybe handle that respectfully, because privacy is a pretty big deal. Some of the people who hold addresses, they're actually individuals. They're not legal entities. If you go into WHOIS, you don't see Corpco in Portland, Oregon sending you packets. You see Randy Bush because he holds the assets as an individual. And that's a pretty massive breach of privacy. So we have to be careful about this, you know?
Thank you, George. We're kind of coming close to the end of our time here. So let me ask one question for the group and then maybe one more kind of closing question. I think it's quite clear and obvious that you all are working on some really cool stuff, some of the future stuff like the RPKI and some of the changes to RDAP. I think it's kind of fascinating. And you do things maybe necessarily not strictly IRR related in some cases. I know RIPE in particular does all kinds of stuff, for instance. What kind of opportunities might someone be appealed to working with your IRR, either full-time? I don't know big you are and how much hiring you do. But what sort of technical opportunities might there be? This is your pitch to make for someone to maybe come apply to you if you have open positions, or maybe internships. We have a lot of young people who are turning into NANOG who wouldn't normally go, who would probably be very interested in helping do work for probably pretty free to help their way through college. Anything going on in that space?
If I may, John, so Afrinic has what we call a research collaboration program where we get interns on board, and for 3 to 6 months, and they can work on various subjects such as any engineering type of work, or also in my department on research subjects. We also do collaborations with academic bodies. So, for example, we send out some collaboration requests to universities here on the continent, requesting support on, let's say, we want to run internet measurement activities, let's say in Congo DRC. Then we will reach out to the different universities there to host, for example, RIPE Atlas anchors or probes, and then we would do the analysis and publish a report at the country level. So this type of research work, we like to collaborate with the students, and yeah, we have this program that we can take them on board.
Great.
If I may as well do some sales pitch. We're actually hiring at the moment, so I have an opening for a DevOps engineer in RPKI. So if you want to help us to do all this cloud deployment, feel free to apply, and also a soft engineer. And one of the things that we're planning to build that I'm quite excited about in the RPKI land is publication as a service. Because now with more and more people running a non-hosted RPKI with Creo, there is a need for resilient repositories. And instead of them running their own repository, they could publish the repositories within the RIPE NCC. It's not. It's on our roadmap, something that we really want to build, but yeah, it's not ready yet.
Right. Maybe there'll be another opening.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Hopefully, if there is people from Latin America watching this talk, we are going to have 2 positions open in my team: one software developer and one systems administrator. And it can be quite challenging and quite fun working for Lightning. We are, I would say, a small team. So the bad thing is you get a lot of work to do. The good thing about that is you get to see and touch a lot of different technologies during your stints at Lightning. And it's definitely a very nice place to work at. I'm biased, of course, but I highly recommend it.
Mark, you look like you want to say something.
yeah, actually, I just want to say that one of the things that is happening at Aaron is that we realized that we need to give more focus to the community on some of our services that we have. And so we just hired a product manager, a senior project manager, who's going to be taking care of routing security, both RPKI and IRR services. So you'll be seeing a lot more of people from Aaron in the future, not just me, but others. So that you can people can see that we're hard at work trying to improve things at Aaron. We have had in the past, we've had interns work at Aaron. I'm not sure how well it's going to work this summer with us being in the sort of COVID environment. And frankly, our office, we're all working remotely. And that's going to be a little bit challenging in the meantime, but we're working through it.
Okay, very good. George, do you have one last thing?
We've got a community trainer position open. So if you're technically adept and good at the communications, and if you've got a language in use in the Asian footprint, we would love to hear from you. We've done interns, works out pretty well. Australia is a nice place to be, but as Mark said, this isn't exactly the right year for global travel. We have some remote workers, it can work, but the time zone shifts between places that people are likely to be can be quite a substantial barrier for us. I don't know that we're in a big growth phase at the moment, but I suspect there'll be technical positions coming up. And as a 20-year person in the RIR, I can say it's a great place to work. So I definitely support people in your community in NANOG, have a look at our job boards because it's a really nice place to be. Public interest work, it's good stuff.
Excellent. Okay, let's end this way. I'll kind of go in the reverse order this time to close. I'll start with you, Amrish, and I'd like each of you to maybe make your last pitch. What is it that a network operator who maybe from NANOG or any other region who maybe wants to operate in your region, what is it they need to know? What should they know about Afrinic and vice versa for each one of you? So what should they know about Afrinic?
We obviously will welcome anyone wishing to operate businesses in Africa. So you actually need to be incorporated in Africa to actually become a member of Afrinic. And we have a dedicated team called the Member Services Team that can help you through the process of getting resources and getting started with your business. And we welcome anyone from whether you're an LIR or whether you are an end user, for example, a bank or a university. So we still, as I said, we still have IPv4 address space so that you can get going with your V4 setup, but we also would encourage you to adopt IPv6, and we have a dedicated team of trainers as well. And we are also doing something rather new called deployathons, where if you're interested as an ISP or as a network, we would work with you and handhold you to actually deploy IPv6 or deploy OPKI on your end to make your services better.
Very good. So Mark, the community watching may be most familiar with your IRR, so you can introduce your IRR to the rest of the world, or perhaps there may be something you want to tell this community, a special message, like here's what you guys aren't doing and ought to do, or here's what you aren't utilizing that you ought to. This is your opportunity to make that pitch to viewers.
Thank you, John. So I guess I'll just say that Aaron's a membership based organization where ISPs is our members, all the way down to individuals, as George said, that people like Randy Bush, who's no longer in our region but was once in our region, we're members or are members, and each of those members have a say, and actually people in the community have a say. So for example, one of the things that we have is we have a suggestion process. So if you see something that we need to be doing differently or better, we have a suggestion process that you can go ahead and submit, and we actually earnestly look at those and work on them on these suggestions. So this isn't this sort of big registry in the cloud or a registry out there that everyone has to deal with, but it's kind of painful. We're trying to be as customer friendly as we can, and trying to achieve or keep on going with what the community wants us to do.
Thank you, Mark. And Felipe, what do network operators need to know about the RIPE IRR?
I think one thing that's interesting, because they all have technical backgrounds, network operators, software engineers, and they tend to not give much attention to the, say, more boring part of the relationship with an RIR, which is keeping the information up to date, giving all the necessary documents and so on. And we do face a lot of challenges because of that. So records are left not up to date, and I'm talking about companies changing name or going through mergers and acquisitions and so on. And then we're finding that out many years afterwards, and then you have to go back and do all the paper trail, and then that can be quite challenging to do. So I know that network operators, they tend not to care much about this, but I would say, please let us know when there is a change, especially the legal structure of your company, so you can speed up things. It's much easier to update your account if the change is fresh, so it's much easier to get all the paperwork and the necessary signatures.
Thank you, Felipe. George, any final remarks, the things that you want people to know in closing about, yeah.
Sure. We're operating in the Australian time zone, AEST. It's GMT plus 10, and we do a 12-hour 9 to 9 window for being online. So we'll talk to you online, Skype, email, phone, VoIP. If you're outside those hours, you may incur a time penalty with us. We've got a really nice new member center. If you just head to the APNIC web and hunt new member center, there's a lot of guidance on how to do process in our web forms or in our systems. Got free training opportunities, free conference registrations for new members. If I wanted people to take away one message, keeping your records up to date, as Felipe said, it's really important. These assets are valuable, and these assets have enormous impact on the global internet operation. You need to secure your retained management of these resources. Keep your information up to date. Do RPKI. If you don't make a public declaration of your origination in BGP, you're at risk. And we're here to help you, and we want you to be in this system and to be as secure as you possibly can. Please come into us and talk to us if you're having problems getting this stuff turned on.
Thank you, George. Carlos?
I would like to
Same
echo
question.
I would like to echo the comments of my colleagues here. I think we share the same interest in being as customer friendly as possible. We certainly encourage new members to keep their documentation and their information updated in our member portal. I would really like to invite everyone who wants to do business in the Latin American region to be part of which I consider is a very lively community with a lot of discussion, and a community where people are used to help each other. You can call us, you can email us, we can Zoom, Skype, whatever. I actually walked members through ROA creation myself, actually helping them discover their own routing policies because they were very confused about their own routing policies. And is that our way of looking at things, and we are happy to do that.
All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. And that'll close us out. We're going to hopefully see you all for a bit of Q&A. I think I saved some of the hardball questions for the audience to ask you, so I wouldn't get in trouble myself directly, but I'll maybe help seed some of those if I don't see any pop up in the window. So thank you again. We'll see you soon in the virtual, or in the virtual NANOG with a live Q&A. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Take care.
That was absolutely awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. We don't have that much time for live Q&A, so I've picked one out of the pile and am going to ask that we round robin through it. And I believe that Carlos is the first one to my right. The question is anything being done to enforce accurate information of contacts, such as useful or working abuse addresses? The comment was, personally, I encountered bad information when attempting to report malicious behaviors.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, definitely. There is, I would say, two things that we are working on and answering the question for LACNIC specifically. There is a policy that was approved and ratified during early 2020, if I remember correctly, that has to do with validating points of contact, particularly abuse contacts. And the idea is to actually ensure that those email addresses, email inboxes are actually monitored. The implementation of such a policy ended up being quite complex, and I hope that it will be implemented. I mean, we have a release date at around March, May, and it should be, I mean, to start rolling the validation around that point of time. The other things that we've done in the past is that we created a dedicated incident response capability within LACNIC, and we have a CSERT. and the CSAT can receive your incident reports and I can actually help you track some specific contact within the organization if you are dealing with a particularly serious incident. So feel free to contact them.
Thank you. Can we move to George, who's the next one over?
Hi. So, like Carlos, we have a mandatory incident response contact policy. We actually did work back in 2010 to make this mandatory for all resource holders. And we had a reaffirmation of this in 2019 with a validation process that requires 6 monthly review. But the lived experience for everyone is that some of these people are simply non-responsive. So we do have a reporting mechanism in our website. If you're experiencing non-responsive abuse contacts and you've reached out to the ISP, we have a process that we can go through. But there is also quite a large amount of asset held in our region that is before strong policy compliance came into being. And there are people who have full use of their resources, but who simply are not going to update their contact information. And we don't have policies that allow us to reclaim because of non-contactability like this. It's not actually our functional role in region to do that. But for most of the cases, yeah, we have a process and we're happy to work with you to keep this information up to date.
Excellent, thank you. Can we pass now down to Felipe, going clockwise?
Yeah, similarly to like Nick, we also have a abuse C validation policy. It was approved, I believe, a bit more than 1 year ago, and we have been doing the validation since early last year. And the process is semi-automated, so we do part of it using a software solution, and we also do a follow-up manually using the host masters. On our own initiative, we want to extend that to all sorts of contacts, so to do a similar validation to all kinds of contacts in the registry. We didn't decide yet exactly how, but that's planned to be done this year.
Thank you very much. Can we move now to Mark?
Sure. So we've had POC validation for a long period of time, over 10 years. And so we've been using that. It's had pretty good success. There's been a number of people who have been uncontactable, much like what George has been talking about. But for the most part, that's worked quite well. So we've been working with keeping our data up to date based on our POC validation that's done on an annual basis.
Thank you, Mark. Amrish, can you finish up the round robin, and then we'll move on to our next presentation, which is the closing.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, indeed. So maintaining updated information in our different databases is absolutely important. And at Afrinic, we have a process called the members contact update, where periodically we will contact the members and make sure all the information in the database is actually accurate. In the past, we have also had abuse contact policies. And unfortunately, they haven't been really, I would say, effective and efficient because currently they are not mandatory. I know we have a new abuse contact policy that has been circulated in our policy discussions at the moment, which is still under discussion. Unfortunately, it hasn't reached consensus yet, but hopefully it will, because I believe it's an important piece of work. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Amrish. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you, and thank you on behalf of John Christoph, who, as I said, was pulled away by a family emergency and couldn't be here.